they can have at a worship service? How many people go to Mass? How many people go to synagogue? How many people can attend a Protestant church service, a Muslim or a Sikh service? I don't know what they would look like, but it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, it is. And yet you have these and the thing I can't get my head around is the RCMP, who are supposed to protect your rights, are out there enforcing the crushing of them. Like, where's the head of the RCMP saying, I don't think so? That's not what the RCMP legacy is. That's not what we're all about. You want to do that, you get some bylaw officers out there, and if you cause any trouble, we'll come and arrest you. I mean, is the whole country just gone to jelly?
Well, it's funny because that you mentioned that about the RCMP, because while I generally wouldn't agree that the RCMP should be refusing to follow, orders that are promulgated by the civilian government, I consider the RCMP and the police to be almost military in that sense. So yes. I generally would be uncomfortable with that, because generally I trust that the civilian government, the civilian authority, is going to act with some sense and reasonableness. But it's funny you mentioned that, Nick, because I flip on the news in the United States, and just before Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving was last Thursday, and of course, governors were saying, oh, you have to limit no more than however many people, no more than 6 people or no more than 10 people having Thanksgiving dinner in your home. And there were sheriffs, police departments that were saying, no, we don't think that order is constitutional, therefore we are not going to enforce it. So it gives you an idea of the different culture between, here in Canada, where the police almost are anxious to get out there and be petty dictators almost, right? And the American mindset, where they're saying, no, we're not doing that, and we don't care if we've been told to do that. So it's a fascinating question, but again, okay, the Constitution I once read in a different book with respect to, and it had to do with the United States, but the principle is the same here. The Constitution is not a suicide pact. And so we recognize, and we have it even entrenched in our Constitution, that the government, following the proper processes, has the right to limit some of our constitutional freedoms or liberties in special circumstances, but only if they're able to justify, demonstrate that those limits are reasonable. And so far, I have not seen, as I say, any evidence. And so, if I'm the Federation of Independent Business, I'd be out there screaming and saying, hey, the people who are part of my association, which are small businesses, mom and pop stores, okay, are being forced out of business while these big box stores remain open, okay? And, when this subject came up, Nick, somebody said, oh, well, I have an idea. Let's just rope off the clothing section of Walmart. I'm going, that's no answer. Let small clothing stores open. And what's the difference, okay? So if I was the Federation of Independent Business, I'd be screaming bloody murder on this. I'd be organizing, surely to goodness, an organization of this nature has the resources available to organize a constitutional challenge. Get some of your members to take this up. Get some of your members to say, okay, we're prepared to close voluntarily if you can show us that having small stores open is the source of the increase in the spread of the virus. If you can demonstrate that to us, and you could even expand that and say, demonstrate to us that this virus is as dangerous as you are making it out to be, and I think that the government might have some difficulty doing that too. But if you can demonstrate those things to us by providing us with the accurate data then we'll close. We'll close voluntarily. We don't even have to have an order.
Well, here's the thing. First of all, if they did that, they would fail miserably because the vast majority of cases come from both private and government-run long-term care facilities.
Oh, you're talking about.
Excuse me.
You're talking about COVID cases.
Yeah, and that's been the genesis for shutting down the economy for almost a year now.
Well, I've heard that, Nick. And I've seen some numbers that I think bear that out, but I haven't actually seen. I guess what I'm hearing is it's more anecdotal. I'm not seeing the evidence, but I believe what you're saying is true. That if the evidence was put out there plainly for people, okay. I think that the government would have a difficult time in demonstrating that it has the right or the responsibility to step in and limit our freedoms in this area. I absolutely believe that.
Excuse me.
And no, Nick does not have COVID-19.
No, he doesn't. He's got COVID-18, which is much less evident.
Anyway. It may be swine flu, but it's not COVID-19.
It's funny you mentioned swine because they got two of them. They got to go to the slaughterhouse. And I'm trying to reach the guy who I want to do it. And it's time to bring an end to their lives and put them in the freezer. Anyway.
Now, Marin, I have to say this. Marin, for our listeners, okay, in the chat room, Marin tells a joke. Reminds me of a sort of joke. How do you get 50 Canadians out of a pool? You yell, "Get out of the pool."
Ain't that the truth? It's funny because when we go to war, we're one of the most ferocious people on the planet. But when we don't, we are the most meek, mild, gentle, soft-spined, polite to a fault people on the same rock. It's just enough to make you weep.
Yeah, and Al, sorry, not Al, AJ raises an excellent question about curfews. You have a curfew, okay? How is this stopping the spread of the virus? People are going in and they're working during the day. They're interacting during the day. They're conducting their business during the day. They're shopping during the day. They're visiting with friends during the day. They're not doing this at 3 a.m. So how is it that making it illegal to be out on the street at 3 a.m. is preventing the spread of this virus? It's imbecilic, some of the stuff that we're doing.
Oh, Joseph, I've never understood how making businesses open less often or shortening their day does anything. All you do then is you get a rush on the business during the hours they are open, because now, if you want to go to the bank as an example, and I don't know if banks are prone to this or not, but let's use the bank as an example, and their business hours were 9 to 5. Now you find out it's 10 to 3. Well, there's a big difference between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock, especially on payday, or especially when you've got some money that you want to put in or take out. If you want to do it in person, you have to head down to the bank, and you have to get there before 3. Well, guess what? You're not the only one thinking that way. Now you've got a whole bunch of other people in line who wouldn't otherwise be there, or you'd spread it out so that there's not as many people in the lineup. And the same thing true with the hardware store, the grocery store, you name it. Anything where they throttle the opening, it's like a Venturi, right? You take a Venturi in a hose and you constrict the opening, you get faster flow through it, and you get more people crowded into that small opening. And that's not good. I don't know how this makes any sense.
Well, and the irony is, taking a bank, for example, okay, it's actually, again, if your objective is to provide a safer, more sanitary environment for your customers, then it makes more sense for you to be open longer hours where you can control the access and have all of the proper safety protocols in place than if you close the bank and you have people going and just using the bank machine. because nobody sanitizes the bank machines in between people using. So you have people who ostensibly could be contagious going and using the bank machine, and then someone coming right up and using the same machine 30 seconds later and getting and being exposed to the virus ostensibly. So the irony is that if you want people, using the bank as an example, to be safer, you should be extending the hours and allowing people to work with the tellers.
Make them 24 hours. That way you go in whenever you want to. You don't like the fact there's people out front, come back in an hour because you know it'll still be open.
It's crazy. It's crazy, Nick.
Using their logic is mind-bending because there isn't any. It's how do they wake up in the morning and say, okay, what can we do to the Canadian people today we didn't do yesterday to make their lives more interesting?
You see, I don't know, Nick. I just think there's something psychological at play here. I don't think this is a grand conspiracy. I don't buy into any of that. I just look at this and go, this is just human nature. People like to be petty dictators. Give them, and I'm going to be really inflammatory now. We're coming up to the top of the hour. We're going to have to take a break. But let me just finish off this segment, Nick, with a bit of a bang, okay? Speaking as a Jew, okay, because I'm Jewish, as you all know. Speaking from that perspective, the people who, when you're walking in the store or on the street and you're not wearing the mask quite properly, who are going to come across and yell at you to wear your mask properly, or in the case of a friend of mine who was swimming recently and somebody saw that they weren't wearing their mask properly and goes and complains to the lifeguard, and the lifeguard comes and scolds them, okay? Those people are the same people psychologically who would be denouncing Jews in Europe during World War II. It's the same mindset, and maybe that's not a very pleasant thing to think of, but that's the way I look at it. Okay. So
well, that is a heck of a bang and a slap upside the head. But you know what? I'm having a hard time trying to say no. That's just crazy talk. It's not, because it doesn't matter what you're afraid of. It's the fear that rules your life. Whether you're afraid of your neighbor because they don't do things and don't look the same as you do, or whether you're afraid of some bug you might get and you want a rat on your neighbor just because he happens to have... I have a true story really fast, but some people I know went to down around one of the burbs around Toronto, and they had to be smuggled in the back of an SUV to go visit their friends. They put them in the back of an SUV, drove into the garage, closed the door, and then let them out. What kind of country do we live in, Joseph?
Well, again, I think people can be very reasonable, and if the government can show us the data properly, respectfully, no spin, I think that they can rely on us to make reasonable, sensible, responsible decisions for our safety and the safety of our neighbors and our families. The problem is that that's not happening, and again, you've let they opened up this Pandora's box where you're basically allowing people to exercise their deeper psychological needs to boss their neighbors around and lord it over them. And I think it's ugly. I think it's dangerous, ultimately. But there it is.
All right. With that, I think it's probably getting close to break time, is it not?
It sure is. So if you're listening to us live on Wednesday night, we will be back in a few minutes. And if you're listening to us on the podcast, we will catch you next time here on the Nick and Joe Show on ThinkRadio.ca.